And welcome back to today's edition of KPUA's Community Forum. I'm your guest host, Ken Hupp, and joining me for today's conversation is Roger Christie of the Hawaii Cannabis Ministry. We've been talking about the war on ice from a somewhat different point of view. And his particular argument is that basically the key to solving the ice epidemic is cannabis, and he has been citing a federal study. Now, this was conducted by it was funded by the National Institute on Drug Abuse, and it was entitled Ice and Other Methamphetamine Use, an Exploratory Study. And basically, just to reiterate the findings of this study and its conclusion, which is pretty much what has been the crux of your argument.
It has been for 17 years now. Marijuana eradication caused the conditions for poverty and hard drug use in Hawaii. First it was crack cocaine, and then it was ice back in the mid-1980s. I'd like to quote one more of the findings from the study. This was a quote from a gentleman that was a respondent to their study. Ice is easier to get than weed. It's not much more expensive than weed either. The amount of people here that use ice is increasing because people who couldn't find weed were starting to find ice easier. Plenty of guys I know use ice because they can't get pot. I'd rather see them smoking Pakalolo because they were mellow, nice people. On ice, they change into robbing houses and carrying guns in less than 1 month. Things they never did on weed. Unquote.
Okay. Now, let's maybe address a couple of points. Are we basically approaching from the premise that people have got to have one of these substances? They can't do without one of them.
The premise is, and this is very important, it's called the primary fundamental right by some people, including me. Who owns your body? Do you own your body, Ken? Do I own my body? Do you in Radio Land people? Do you want to own your own body, or do you want some nanny, some government to own your body and tell you what to do with it? Did you know that top guns in the U.S. Air Force get methamphetamine and are required to take it on some of their missions while they're flying those war machines?
For what purpose?
To stay awake. They're actually required to take it if they've been in the air X amount of hours, and to get back to the home base safely, they're required to take methamphetamine. Doctor's orders. They have to follow the orders of their commanders. So, are we giving equal, treatment to people here? No. And of course, methamphetamine is poisonous for people. It's kind of like the bathtub gin of the drug war. Back in alcohol prohibition days, when people just wanted to get high drinking alcohol, the government and the communities made it illegal. Well, what people did was they started making their own in the bathtub, and it was of poor quality and poisonous. That's what's happening with ice. It's poor quality, it's poisonous, people are making it at home. There's a parallel here. And so how did we end that horrible period of crime and disease and trouble? We made a constitutional amendment, and we removed the prohibition and made it legal again. And so people that have some business sense and some ethics go into the business, pharmaceutical companies or distillers, would make a decent product that people can choose in the free marketplace to put or not put in their bodies. I don't recommend people take it, of course. But here's the U.S. military recommends it for their Top Gun, their best and brightest pilots, to take a form of methamphetamine. That's been proven, and it was the subject of news media a couple months ago when some pilots actually blamed the methamphetamine that they were required to take for the friendly fire incident of killing a few Canadians in Afghanistan.
Okay. I understand the correlation now that you are drawing between prohibition with alcohol and what we have right now. Is it a fair comparison to go and then perhaps leap to the conclusion that much the same as when prohibition was repealed and people were allowed to drink without a fear of penalty, that presumably a social condition improved, that if in fact marijuana was either decriminalized or legalized, that people would just automatically stop using ice?
I think the ice would melt. Nobody gets shot over beer profits anymore.
Hopefully not, no.
Okay, now that was commonplace because of prohibition. It wasn't the substance. The substance doesn't cause the problem as much as the prohibition of the substance. And when you're in a country that's supposedly a free country, people are supposed to own their own bodies and make their own personal choices. They should go to the marketplace and have quality products to choose from. And cannabis can be a quality product if it's organically grown in a setting, especially a sanctuary setting. If people use it with reverence and with respect, it's a barrier to other harder substances. I think we can prove it now. And if our policymakers are so enlightened and they want to look at every possibility to solve this situation, then they will allow an example in the community. They'll allow a few of us that want to have cultivation facilities to go into to prove our point. I want one of them. I know my friend Jonathan Adler wants one of them. I know there are probably some other people in the community want one of these cultivation facilities. Let's have an experimental model, for God's sakes, if we're looking at every point of view and we're bold enough to do so, because, when you're lost in a storm, any direction might be your way out. If you're totally lost and thrown up your hands, which our government is doing now, then any point of view may be the way home. And I've got a way, backed by a federal study, and other people do too. And I think it's malfeasance, an act of malfeasance for Mayor Harry Kim and the majority of the county council to approve of more eradication money when they know, in legal terms, they have knowledge, a forethought, that marijuana eradication, the program they fund, caused the conditions for the ice epidemic. I need 100 signatures on a petition for impeachment, and I'm at 961-0488. People can look at my website, and we're going to do an impeachment online on the web at thc-ministry.org, and we're going to get educated and help solve this situation here and not be kept out of another ICE summit meeting because this solution is too uncomfortable for our policymakers. Many of them caused the ice epidemic. This didn't just happen. This got by everybody because there was never a mandatory program review of the marijuana eradication program, which we've been begging this community to do as long as I've been here, 17 years. Every single year I speak out of county council repeatedly to do the audit that's required by law that has never, ever been done.
Right. Address that with the just a couple minutes that we do have left on what the charter requires, according to your reading and interpretation of it, what has been done, and how, in your view, this does not satisfy the spirit and intent of what is spelled out in the charter.
All you have to do is ask Harry Kim or the county council to put the mandatory program review for marijuana eradication on the table. They can put the program review for the Humane Society on the table. They did a beautiful one a few years ago because it was a contentious issue and needed some attention in our community. They spent, $15,000 or so and had an independent, critical review of what was going on in the dog pound. But they've never done an equal program review for marijuana eradication.
What have they done?
All they do is what they've done is 2 years ago, Chairman Arakaki put the marijuana eradication grant money, which was always the subject of special hearings, standalone hearings at the county council. He hid it in the big budget. So it's one of now 10,000 budget items, and it's virtually lost in the morass of the giant budget, which was just passed last week. So it doesn't get the special standalone hearing, and people don't get the chance to come out because most people don't pay attention to the giant big budget. They hope their policymakers are doing the right thing. But in years past, we had very spirited county council meetings. You've probably been to some of them. And people showed up with their tearful and heartfelt testimony and said that they've been damaged by helicopters. Their privacy has been violated. Their domestic tranquility has been abused. And their farm animals have been scared. Their children have been terrorized. Their rights have been violated. Those hearings were a problem to some on the county council. And so they did away with the hearings. Instead of solving the problem, they silenced the people that would speak up and testify.
My question is, has anything even resembling a program review been done since I recall this issue first being brought up around 1994 or 95, and there were actually one or two on the council that were pretty vocal about it. My understanding is that some sort of a study was done. Explain what that is and how this differs from, I think, your understanding of what the program review is supposed to be. That's the point that I'd like you to make.
We actually convinced the majority of the county council in the mid-90s, you are correct, to do a mandatory program review. They voted on it. They approved it. It never showed up. What did we get instead? A special study, wink, wink, that didn't ask the one big question. What unintended consequence, what negatives did we get by purchasing a marijuana eradication program? They did it. They even call it a special study because it's not a program review. It was done in-house.
Okay, yes. Please specify the difference between a special study and a program review.
Well, a special study is done by people on your team who don't want the negative results to come out. So they put out all this fluff and all these statistics and all this data that doesn't ask the one key central question that a mandatory program review must ask, and that is, were there any unintended consequences that taxpayers purchased with this program? Did it do any harm to the community? They refused to ask that core question.
Okay, and this question is asked in, say, the Humane Society program?
Sure, you've got to know what harm, sure, we want to know what good the program has done, and you want to know what harm the program has done. The special study refused to ask that key question, so they never examined it, and it was done in-house, funded by the council, done by the legislative auditor's office, so it wasn't independent, and it wasn't critical. Those are two key components for a program review. It needs to be hired out by somebody with no ties to the county council, who doesn't see them and at the coffee pot every morning, for God's sakes, and get their paycheck from the same place. It needs to be independent and critical. Wake up, Big Island community. We're being hoodwinked. There's a cover-up going on here. It's killing our community. It's strangling the aloha here. And it's a very simple solution. We need a mandatory program review. We need to stop marijuana eradication now. One of the key agencies, the DEA, they almost never get asked questions here. The National Guard, I doubt if they've ever been in here and been questioned by the news media. What are you doing with marijuana eradication? They get away with flying helicopters and terrorizing our community. The DEA is so unenlightened and so upside down in their understanding of drugs, and this is the Drug Enforcement Agency. They still believe there is no such thing as medical marijuana, and that industrial hemp for clothing and breakfast cereal and all the different products is as dangerous as heroin and needs to remain in Schedule 1, the very most dangerous classification of drugs. These guys are not to be taken seriously. Really, they need to be questioned thoroughly, because their ridiculous nonsense that they put in the community, in the DARE program, in the offices of policymakers, is wrong. And it's so wrong that, in my opinion, they need to be put on an airplane and escorted out of town. And the local policymakers that approve of this nonsense for the war on ice and the war on marijuana need to be impeached, and other legal remedies need to take place right now.
By the way, is that a hemp shirt you're wearing?
No, it's got my crest. No, it's a cotton shirt. Okay. I love cotton too. Thank you very much. I'm an equal fabric enjoyer.
Okay. Once again, if anybody wants any more information from you on anything that we've discussed, how can they contact you?
961-0488. Please leave your name and phone number. Let's get this impeachment rolling. Let's get these politicians and policymakers out of office, and let's get back to a state of aloha that we all remember.
Okay, Roger, thank you very much for joining us on today's edition of KPUA's Community Forum. And that's going to wrap up today's program. As always, we thank you for joining us and for allowing us to become a part of your morning. And if you happen to have an issue or an event you think ought to be on the forum, then give our offices a call at 935-5461, and we'll do the rest. Right now, we're going to go and check in with Brian McFadden of the Wall Street Journal, see if we've had any kind of a turnaround today on Wall Street, and then we'll drop in and visit the Dan Patrick Show for a little while to take us up to the top of the hour.